Hello, it's FaceTime with Miss J. So the first concept that I really want to share with you guys is that building sentences is a lot like playing with Legos. There's different pieces, right? There's like the short little ones with only the two little prongs, and then there's like, you know, the ones with like 5 or 6. Well, when you learn about simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences, and compound complex sentences, you're really just building on different types of Legos. It's like different shapes, and they all work together. Okay, so the first major type of sentence that you need to know about is called a simple sentence. And it's really, you know, simple. It's funny because I think some students have a pretty hard time with simple sentences though, because, well, for whatever reason, they forget what subjects and verbs are. And then there's a lot of other stuff in sentences that they don't recognize either, so it's hard for them. They get kind of tangled up sometimes. But, you know, that's really sort of a different lesson. You know, if you don't know about subjects and verbs, then I'll teach you about that some other episode. Now, I'll tell you this. Every type of sentence has subjects and verbs in them. The simple sentence has subjects and verbs. The compound sentence has subjects and verbs. Mr. Andrew Lee just interrupted me. Okay. So, he's laughing at me, teaching my lesson to you guys. He's, yeah. Okay, so, where was I? The simple sentence has a subject and a verb, and it expresses a complete thought. It's the most basic building block that you can use. When you start moving up into the other levels, then it gets more complicated. So when we talk about the simple sentence, you've got to understand that that's the basic building block, and then from there we can add on. Sentences that comprise the compound sentence. So we have simple sentence equaling subject plus verb, and you have 2 of those joined together properly to make a compound sentence. So how do we do that? Well, we need to know about something called coordination. And I mean, if you know, coordination is a fancy word for, you know, think about your arm, right? Your arm has a joint. The joint coordinates 2 of your bones. Well, there's probably more bones for those of you who study anatomy, but okay, basic here, right? Basic concepts, basic analogy. We've got these 2 bones that are coordinated by the joint. You know, that's one way I like to think of a compound sentence, is you've got 2 equal halves coordinated at the center by this joint. And what is this joint? Well, you can create a joint a lot of different ways. There are 3 specific ways that I like to teach that are the most common. The first way is to join 2 simple sentences to make 1 compound sentence by joining them using a comma plus a fanboy. What's a fanboy? A fanboy is one of the, 7 coordinating conjunctions. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. we say fanboys because it's like, you know, an easy acronym to remember, fanboys. It helps us to remember those coordinating conjunctions. So we can use any one of those, but a comma has to come first. Why? Well, that's just the rule. You've got to have a comma plus a fanboy if you're going to join two simple sentences. So that's one type of joint, a comma plus a fanboy. Now there are other types of joints. The second type of joint is the semicolon. And the semicolon is a very elegant tool because it's a single piece of punctuation that does two jobs. It's kind of like, as I've taught it before, it's like having your cake and eating it too. It ends the previous simple sentence with the period, and it continues with the comma onto the second simple sentence. So it's ending and continuing at the same time. The reason why you must use a semicolon instead of a comma to do that is if you do not end one sentence and then begin the other, then it's just grammatically incorrect. You're not taking into consideration the fact that that first simple sentence has to be ended before you move on to the second one. So you have to end with a period and continue with the comma, hence the semicolon. It does two jobs for the piece, you know, the price of one piece of punctuation. The comma can't do that. It can only continue. And since that first simple sentence is itself its own independent clause, it's ending. You can't just go on to the next one without that proper piece of punctuation. And the most common error that people make is something called a comma splice, which is when you join together two simple sentences using only a comma. Remember, you have two choices here. You can either use a comma plus a fanboy to join, or you can use a semicolon. But you can't use a comma. The last type of coordinating conjunction that you can use is a semicolon, and then you can also add on sort of an introductory phrase followed by a comma to begin the second simple sentence. So you could say something like, you know, I like cheese, you know, however, I don't like crackers. Now, if you wanted to join those two ideas, I like cheese, I do not like crackers, they're obviously sort of opposites, right? Or they don't sort of go together, because usually we think of people liking cheese and crackers, you know. But this person only likes cheese, not crackers. So the word however is appropriate to connect those two ideas together. It would be inappropriate to just put a semicolon because the idea is changing. A semicolon tends to suggest only that these two things belong together, not that we're transitioning between two sort of opposite ideas. So it's a more complicated way to join two simple sentences into a compound sentence to use the semicolon plus an introductory phrase, but remember to always follow that introductory word or phrase with a comma. Semicolon, however, comma is a common one. So, and there's lots of different ones that can be, you know, different words, different introductory words that can be used there. So again, those three different types of joints. You've got the comma plus a fanboy, the semicolon, or the semicolon plus an introductory word or phrase followed by a comma before moving on to that second simple sentence. So that's the compound sentence in a nutshell. When we talk about the complex sentence, that's a very different ball of wax. Well, the complex sentence is different from the compound sentence because unlike the compound sentence, the complex sentence does not have two independent clauses. It only has one independent clause and then one dependent clause. The dependent clause is dependent because it relies on the independent clause to make it make sense and not be a fragment. Because otherwise, if you put a dependent clause all by itself, then it violates the rule of a sentence, which is that it has to stand alone. Now, this type of fragment, the dependent clause, it's not like a typical fragment. It probably has a subject and a verb. In fact, it has to have a subject and a verb because it's a clause. But in addition to having a subject and a verb, well, it's not complete. And that may make you wonder, well, why isn't it complete if it has a subject and a verb? Well, it has this other type of word attached to itself that makes it unstable or unfinished. And that's called a subordinating conjunction. So we've got these like two different types of conjunctions floating around. We've got coordinating and subordinating. Now, coordinating implies equivalence, that there's sort of two equal parts that are being joined together, like a seesaw being joined by a fulcrum at the center, or like different halves of a scale or something. That's the compound sentence. The complex sentence, on the other hand, doesn't have equivalence, and that's because there's, again, something on one of the clauses that makes it unstable. So like if we had, unless I go to the store, okay, well, what about it? The word unless is a subordinating conjunction. It makes the whole statement unstable. And what makes it a subordinating conjunction, or what's to do with subordinating? Subordinating, if you look at the root sub, it means below or beneath, like a subway or a submarine. Sub means below or beneath, and basically if you have a word like unless, which is a subordinating conjunction, it kind of makes the whole clause that comes after it sort of fall beneath or have to rely on the sentence that it's attached to. The other half, makes it complete. So the complex sentence is just like a compound sentence, except one of its halves has something that makes it unstable or incomplete. And that's how it joins to the other simple sentence. It joins to it because it requires it or needs it to be, to remain not a fragment. Because you could just break up a compound sentence easily. You could get rid of the coordinating conjunction. You could have this simple sentence here and this simple sentence there, and you could put a period in between them, and, that would be fine too. But you couldn't do that with a complex sentence. The two parts couldn't just be separated with a period, because the dependent clause half would require the independent clause half in order to remain not a fragment. So that's what's basically different about the complex, is it has an unstable half. Now, if you can understand all that, then basically you understand the building blocks of sentences. But there is a fourth type of sentence. And what's going on with the fourth type of sentence is it's really just a combination of the two of them, well, all of them really. But it's generally a combination of a compound sentence and a complex sentence, which means that it has at least 3 sets of subject and verb groups. It's got, if it has a compound sentence, it has 2 simple sentences joined together with a coordinating conjunction. So it's got a subject and a verb on each half of the coordinating conjunction. But then it's also being joined to a dependent clause. So that whole complex or compound sentence is being joined to a dependent clause, which it's like a complex sentence, but one of the halves is actually a double. It's a compound. So again, it's if you think about the Lego metaphor, it's like you're adding more Lego cubes together. You're combining. You can have lots of different varieties. You can have lots of different combinations. You can put things in different orders. With a dependent clause, you can sometimes put the dependent clause first, and you can sometimes put the dependent clause second. When you have a complex sentence, or in the compound complex sentence, the dependent clause can be in any number of places in the sentence. And you can have more than one dependent clause in a compound complex, just like you can have more than one independent clause. So again, once you understand the basic simple, compound, and complex sentence, the compound complex is really just a matter of connecting as many different pieces together in a grammatically correct way using the proper punctuation. What I'd like you guys to do for your homework assignment is to actually go back and look at one of your essays, preferably essay 4, since you need to work on a revision for that, and start to revise it. And in particular, revise it looking at your sentences. How are you going to revise your essay to make sure that it has a variety of sentence structures? Sometimes simple sentences are appropriate. As we've talked about in other episodes, even fragments can sometimes be rhetorically powerful. So can a small, simple sentence be rhetorically powerful and useful at certain moments. If you had a whole essay full of simple sentences and nothing but, it would get, terribly boring after a while. But, if you mix it in with a variety of other types, it can be quite appropriate and interesting. But as a whole, I'd like to see you guys introduce more compound, complex, and compound complex sentences into your writing, because again, it demonstrates more sophistication and complexity and variety as well. So here I am. I finally have arrived at Margot's school. It's time to go to Taqueria tonight and get a tasty burrito. And that's really been my lesson, so thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Well, that's been an episode of FaceTime with Miss J. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Hi, Marks.
Oh, hi.
Where are we?
You know where we are. Oh, wait, oh, video. Oh, we're at Taqueria.
The happiest place on earth, right?
Hi, Mom.
Your finger's in front of the window, isn't it?
No, it isn't.
Our food's ready.
Soup. That's where we're sitting.
All right, turn it on.
Soup. And that is the greatness of Taqueria.